Hello, I'm Dr. Basil Constantine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to be talking about how to write and sell a professional philosophy. And if that sounds like it might be a little bit dry for you, don't worry. We're going to go to Game of Thrones, to the world of Westeros, for our examples for how to expound a professional philosophy and convince other people around you that that's a good idea. So before we dive in, we are, of course, here from the ACU Online Writing Center, which works with students in just about every online program available at Abilene Christian University. You can make appointments for us several different ways. You can make email appointments, you can make Zoom appointments, you can come to webinars like this and ask questions, you can come to our open office hours, and you can just outright email us questions. We're going to be using the APA course paper template that's on this page. If you'd like to take a moment, and if you're watching this on video, pause the video and download that now. That will make things a little bit more direct when we get to that. All right, so we're going to start by looking at a particular assignment in the APCO 465 course, and then we'll talk about how to create an argument, the argument being selling people that your philosophy is a valid and worthy thing, and ideally, in most cases, when you're selling them on the philosophy, convincing them that they should adopt it, whether that's they're hiring you, whether that is they're adopting this approach to the world themselves or something else. So let's take a look at this assignment. And this is coming from the Healthcare Leadership and Relationship Management course. And I think anyone who works in healthcare will acknowledge that relationships are powerful things. And when it's a positive relationship, you can do great things. And when you have a toxic relationship, it is hard to get things done and get them done well. I have talked to so many patients over the years who said that something that a healthcare provider said just turned them off, and so they didn't want to do it. Even if they knew it would be good for them, they dug in their heels. And other people who had an experience that was so negative, so unpleasant, that they stayed away from healthcare for a long time. And I think we can all agree that attending to health is very important and that we do not want to throw up unnecessary barriers to that. So with that, let's take a look at this assignment about developing a teamwork approach. Now it begins with the preamble, and just for reference, we might look at the assignment as it exists on a web page to just visually compare the layout that I have here with the layout as represented on the web page itself. All right, so if I go ahead and I share my web browser here, you should see that we have this here. This particular assignment does divide it up clearly. We have the purpose, we have the instructions with some basic parameters, and then the real substance are these sections here. And then you can see there is a rubric. So if we break this up into as we need to think about these things, then we have the front matter, the preamble, if you will, where we have the stated purpose of the assignment, and then the guiding instructions before we go into the meat and potatoes, or tofu and tempeh, if you prefer. So purpose. This assignment will help students to develop a better understanding of the importance of teamwork and the importance of interprofessional working relationships. This paper should be 2 to 3 pages long. That's 2 to 3 pages, not counting the title page, not counting the reference page, and in APA format. Use sources from this week's readings or resources and outside sources when necessary to support your answers. Okay. So what is it asking us to do exactly? Well, first, to reflect on your teamwork approach and to write a teamwork philosophy for your future employers. This would be the philosophy that you would ideally be living out, practicing, building, and answer the questions, what is teamwork or group unity? And why is it so important in the healthcare management field? Support your answer with 1 to 2 examples. Now, if we're looking at the second bullet, you might notice that there's a small typo there, but we know what's going on here. And well, of course, you can pass on feedback for this for anything that you see. The reality is that in the workplace, you will often see things like this where you need to do a little bit of reading between the lines. And I would always take something like this as an encouragement to double check your own work because in all the years that I've been doing this, I know very well that if I stay up late at night, I will miss some things like that. So we need to answer that question. What is teamwork or group unity, and why is it so important in the healthcare management field? Now, imagine you are applying for a job in leadership and healthcare management. You're asked to write a statement that expresses your stance on the importance of interprofessional working relationships in the healthcare management field. In one page, what would your statement say? And there's a little note saying that, this is something that's going to come back in another assignment. So make sure it's something that you believe in that you can dig into later. And if we look at this, we see that it is really a list of 4 main requirements, and then the length and APA formatting requirement, and that those are graded based on how much you do this fully and in appropriate detail. Keep in mind that this is supposed to be a 2 to 3 page paper. Okay, so far so good, but how do we go about selling people on our philosophy? How would you structure this? And for this, we want to turn to a system of organizing an argument. And there are several out there, but the one that I advocate the most is one that I developed called the no tiers plan for paragraph writing. So in upper level undergraduate writing and in graduate level professional writing, most of the time we're going to be aiming for body paragraphs that are around 5 to 7 sentences. Some will be a little shorter, some might be a little longer, but 5 to 7 sentences is enough to make a main point, give supporting evidence, and then we're either going to move on to another instance in a new paragraph, move on to a different subtopic within the paper. So what does the no tiers mnemonic stand for? Nothing omitted. Topic sentence, evidence or argumentation, analysis, repeat as necessary, synthesis, and then when we are wrapping up an argument, we might have a concluding or transitioning sentence. Now, some arguments are spread across multiple paragraphs. Some paragraphs you might be front loading and giving a lot of information and saving your analysis for follow-up. But most of the time, you're going to be giving pieces of evidence at a time, analyzing them, telling the reader what they mean, and synthesizing to tell them what all this means when considered together and applied to what it is you're trying to do. So let's now turn to first, if you want to know more about the no tiers plan and this method of structuring argument, go to our website to watch our Beyond Summary webinar or our Synthesis and Consequences webinar, both of which go into this in more detail than we will today. Now, before we dive in, I'm going to remind you, you can always send questions to onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu, and you can go to my.acu.edu and under academic resources, select Online Writing Center and follow the instructions to make an appointment. Now you'll see here that I have prepared a copy of our APA course paper template, which you can download from our website. And I've filled in the information for my title page. So we've got the title of the paper, the name of the writer, Joffrey Baratheon, the program, the course number, the professor, and the date. So far, so good. Now I've gone here to the first page of the body here. So excluding the title page, this is where we start counting for the length of the paper, which again should be 2 to 3 pages of content plus the title page and the references. And so we see that we are directed by the instructions to have 2 major parts: the reflection on the teamwork approach and the statement of your stance on the importance of interprofessional working relationships. Now, if we are dividing this, a helpful way to clarify things is that, we know we're going to have an introduction for the paper. So let's add that. And we also know that we're going to have part 1. So I can start typing that out, part 1, and my teamwork approach. And then we can go ahead to the styles bar here, or pop out the styles pane here for easy reference. And so any text that we select here, we want that to be a heading in APA style. Well, the first level heading we use is an APA level 1, so I just click on that. And you can see it's now formatted it as an APA level 1 heading. You still need to do the capitalization, but everything else is done for you when you use the styles bar here. So we have the teamwork approach reflection. Okay. And we need to write the teamwork philosophy, which again, we can select that. And oh, this is a subsection of part 1. So let's make that the next heading now, level 2. We also know from this that we need a section on the importance of unity. In APA style, the heading names do not need to be fancy. They don't need to be poetic. What they do need to be is reasonably descriptive and accurate. And concise is a virtue, so generally we go shorter rather than longer. And we can see here that it is telling us that we need 1 or 2 examples. So let's make some notes here. We need example 2 and example 1. And then we have this other section here. And so again, we can use the styles pane and layout. That is our level 1 heading. And now we're set to start filling in some details here. So let's go ahead and worry about the introduction later, because you'll know what you're going to be describing a lot better when you have some details here. So what is your teamwork approach? This is a good place to create some notes. Now, keep in mind that the author of our paper here is Joffrey Baratheon, and their thoughts are probably not what you want to be using for your own course paper, but let's see where this goes. Now, as you are making notes here, you're going to be starting usually with either a key idea or a topic sentence or thesis statement. And in this case, what's the nutshell? Well, for Joffrey Baratheon, my approach to teamwork is that all teams support the leader, who will, of course, be me. Why? By royal right. Now, this is probably not the argument you're going to be making in a healthcare setting, but this is Joffrey we're talking about here. So their reasoning will be backed up with a lot of evidence and argumentation. It just may not be something that you agree with, but let's look at how that structure might look. And so we've laid out a basic approach to planning out this paragraph. We have the central claim, and then we have a need for evidence. So what will we put down there? Well, a good place to think of is, do you have anyone who said that this is a good idea, or any examples that you can draw on? And so here we have our first piece of evidence supporting that claim in the topic sentence. Early during my reign, there was a deficit of team support, which plunged Westeros into rebellion, as 4 other persons declared that they were king. Okay, so what does that mean? That's stating a fact, but how was that important to our argument? Well, this is where the analysis comes in. And so we have that piece of evidence here, and now it's being interpreted in analysis. During the resulting war, hundreds of thousands died from the violence, most of whom were small folk who starved. This caused a sharp decrease in royal tax income. Now, this is not telling us great things about the writer's line of priorities, but again, it is analysis that supports why the evidence is important, at least to them. Now, that by itself is probably not enough to convince people of this, so we need more evidence and analysis. So let's see what we can add. Now, the analysis is partly interpreting what was said by comparing it to other things. You might compare different studies, you might compare, in this case, different reigns. So the counterpoint to the evidence, in addition, many inhabitants of the North and the Reach were carried off into slavery by ravaging Ironborn, is this did not happen during the reign of my father, Robert Baratheon, who demanded allegiance from all of his teams. Now, where are we going? Well, first, this is Joffrey, so A, it might not be nice, but B, we were looking for a clear logic and clear consequence. And one of the things that people appreciate about Game of Thrones is that there are many seeds planted for how Joffrey, the young boy, grows into the tyrant that he became. And looking back, you can see, oh, I see how that happened. And you see a clear system of events and a clear logic, twisted though it may be, to how and why he did the things that he did. Now, this is Joffrey who we were talking about. So uh, his synthesis from this, the lesson that he is bringing from all this, is probably not one that you want to bring to a healthcare context. But here we have it. Therefore, to promote strong leadership and the good of the realm, I will have all who do not give me unquestioning allegiance executed. Well, that does sound very on brand for Joffrey. Please do not try and do this in your work in healthcare or anywhere else. Now, something to consider as you're building out your outline here is that we want to have an idea for the approximate lengths, and it's helpful to give yourself notes here. So I'm going to suggest 1 to 2 pages for the My Teamwork approach and 1 page for the teamwork philosophy. These are approximate things, but here's why. Let's go take a look back at the instructions here and see what they have laid out for the relative sections. So if we look at the instructions themselves, we get 2 to 3 pages overall. So that first section I marked doesn't have to be 2 pages, but aiming for longer will help us see how well we can support these ideas. And we see that we need at least 2 examples. Okay, so that'll go in that section. And if we look at the grading here, we see that the Rights of Teamwork philosophy discusses the importance of it and supports it with examples. Altogether, that is going to be 80 points. Now, 80 points is almost 2/3 of the points for this assignment. So that's why I look at this and I say, okay, if that's 80 points and the statement expressing the importance of interprofessional working relationships is 35 or a little bit less than a third, that suggests that they should be in roughly a 2-to-1 ratio in length, just to give adequate space for this. So even though it doesn't strictly have to be those lengths, we can look at this and say that is approximately how long these instructions suggest it should be. Okay, great. Let's go back to our outline here. Now we're going to need 2 examples supporting this. And you can see that we have the philosophy here. And actually, I see I misplaced here. This 1 page here should actually be going here for interprofessional working relationships in healthcare management. So altogether, this section should be 1 to 2 pages. And then we have the subsection on teamwork philosophy and the subsection on the importance of teamwork and unity. So let's just put some things in here. And you don't necessarily have all of the ideas in sentence form when you start, but you can certainly make a list of the things that you want to put in each section. So in our example here, Joffrey, being Joffrey, has gone ahead and put in some elements that they want to incorporate into their teamwork philosophy. And these include unquestioning loyalty, betrayals are immediately punished, royalty is right, no one insults the leader, and I can do what I want. All right. So what is teamwork or group unity so important to them? Well, they can come up with some examples here. I don't think we need to spend time on that here. But let's take a look at this interprofessional working relationships section. So imagining you are applying for a job in leadership and healthcare management, you're asked to write a statement that expresses your stance on the importance of interprofessional working relationships in the healthcare management field. In 1 page, what would your statement say? Well, we're probably talking 2 to 3 paragraphs here. So it might be helpful to think about what are the key things to do here. And because healthcare in Westeros is, shall we say, not something that you want to have to experience, let's go ahead and diverge slightly from our Game of Thrones theme here. Now, as you are planning this out, it's helpful to think about what are the things that are most important to you. And that might be context driven. I know people who believe that service is at the heart of the leadership they want to be a part of, and that manifests in different ways. And then there are people who see it as more, if that's my job to do it, I'll do it and I'll do it well. But that's a context driven thing for me. An example might be, you might not do some things in some jobs, but if someone's life is on the line, you might be acting differently. And I don't know what those will be, but there you might find that there's some things that are bendable and some things that are unshakable. And so you might come up with a list of things. We're just putting in placeholders here because you, of course, will be deciding what is important to you. And then you can put them into action. And by doing this, and this is a simple structure, we said, okay, well, let's identify what it is and then explain what it is in practice through giving an example of how that would look when you implemented it in another paragraph, and then talk about the challenges or disadvantages. And pretty soon you'll be able to fill that out and you'll have enough ideas to fill a page. And now we're going back to the question of, all right, so you've done the things that the paper asks you to, and now we need to add a conclusion. So just looking through this, starting with the instructions and asking, what does it want me to do exactly? What would that look like in length according to the proportions that are given, again, in the assignment rubric? We see that there are detailed instructions here on what things to write in what order, and we can guess from the number of points assigned how much we should be writing on each of those sections. And from that, we can go ahead and plot out, okay, approximately how many paragraphs. Doesn't mean you can't have a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on their full length. But that gives us an idea of, hey, if we only have 1 to 2 pages for this section, then a intro paragraph or two on the teamwork approach is probably going to be about right, because again, you only have 2 to 3 pages for the whole paper. And in this case, we have our topic sentence, evidence, analysis, more evidence, more analysis, and then the synthesis. And that's a pretty strong opening paragraph. Again, please do not do as Joffrey did. He was a terrible person. And although he had a twisted logic, that would be really, really bad to apply in healthcare. So with that, I think that's time for us to bring things to a close here. So again, if you have any uncertainty about where to start, it's always helpful to go back to this plan of how to make an argument and say, okay, what's the thing I'm trying to convince the reader of? That should be in my topic sentence. That's the claim that I'm making that the rest of the paragraph is supporting with evidence, with analysis, with synthesis. We have these webinars if you want to go into more detail on that topic. And you can always send us an email at onlinewritingcenter.acu.edu or make up to 2 appointments per week by going to my.acu.edu under academic resources, selecting Online Writing Center and following the instructions. Good night.